Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cross Campus. My name is Isabel. I'm membership director here. How many of you guys is this your first time in Cross Campus? Okay, so a lot of you. So for those of you who don't know what we are a co-working space and a business event venue. So what that means is this is where people come to do their work. This is their office. This is where they hold meetings. This is where they meet people and make friends and find partnerships, maybe clients, maybe new hires, maybe someone just to work on a project with. Our community is one of LA's largest communities, actually, of entrepreneurs, innovators, freelancers, people who work from home who need to get out of the house and want to be surrounded by other people. So we've got a very wide variety of professions and people here. And if that sounds like something you're interested in learning more about, come find me in the back after the event and I can tell you more about membership here at Cross Campus. Thank you.
Wow, packed room. Thank you guys so much for coming tonight. On behalf of KPCC Southern California Public Radio, welcome to Hack the Vote. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar with KPCC, we are a multi-platform organization. We are on the air, we are online, and we are in person like tonight. So thank you so much for coming out. Just a show of hands, how many of you are KPCC listeners? Nice, nice. How about KPCC members? Sweet, sweet, sweet. Okay. Is this anyone's first event? Maybe clap your hands so I can hear. Okay, nice. Is this one of the many events you've been to at KPCC? Sweet. All right. Well, if you are new to KPCC and you want to find out more information, just go to kpcc.org/in-person. You can find out about all of our in-person events. That would be great. And before I start here, I just want to give a big, big thank you to Cross Campus for having us here and for everyone here who decided to come. Really, thank you so much. And so if you're wondering what's on the agenda tonight, we're going to look at social media. What are we seeing on our news feeds? What are candidates pushing towards us? And is it swaying the way we vote? We're going to look at apps and different organizations that are on the ground trying to get the next generation of voters civically engaged. And then we're going to look at voting itself, the challenges that are part of it, and some of the things we want to see in the future and some of the changes we want to see to make it easier and to get more young people out voting. Just a note, we're going to be live tweeting this. So during this event, we'd love if anything comes to mind, if any ideas about maybe possible apps you'd like to see or ways to make voting easier, please tweet at us. That is at KPCC in person and hashtag #HackTheVote. So please tweet at us. Let us know your ideas. And just some small housekeeping. Please turn the flash off your phones if you're taking photos. And also any ringers. We definitely want to encourage you, take photos, share it on social media. And now, again, a big thank you to Cross Campus for having us here, and I'd love to introduce our host of tonight's event. That's our senior politics reporter, Mary Plummer.
Everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. As Charlotte mentioned, tonight we're going to be talking about technology and the role of social media and young people in this year's elections. As we edge closer to the June primary here in California and the November general election, it's been so fascinating to watch how the dynamics around these issues play out. And we've got an incredible panel here tonight who's going to talk through all of that with us. So we're going to keep it informal. We're going to bring in your questions, towards the end of the program. But thank you again for being here with us. And with that, I'm going to welcome our guests to the stage. First up, we've got Taz Ahmed. She's campaign strategist at 18millionrising.org. Welcome. Yes, thank you. Nate Kaplan, if you'd come up, founder of C Political. Oscar Menivar, he's the founder of TXT, Teens Exploring Technology. Sumi Parekh, Director of Government Relations and Outreach at Ballot. Welcome, Sumi. Juan Vasquez, the Communications and Data Analyst working with the Mayor's Operations Innovation Team. And Hunter Scarborough, co-founder of Voter. So thank you all for being here. I wanted to give you all just a chance to kind of run through and introduce yourselves a bit further and tell us a bit about the work you've been doing. So Taz, if we could start with you.
Sure. Is this working? Yes? Yeah.
We're good? Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name's Taz. I'm the campaign strategist at 18 Million Rising. Just a little bit about me. I've been doing electoral organizing for about 15 years. I really got my start when I was in D.C. and 9/11 happened. I'm Muslim, South Asian, and when 9/11 happened, there was incredible backlash in the Muslim community. So soon after that had happened, I started an organization called South Asian American Voting Youth because I was concerned with how the Muslim and South Asian community really didn't have any power at that time. So I was trying to figure out why didn't we have any power. It's because not only were we not voting, there was no data for the folks that were actually voting. So that's kind of what I've been grappling with throughout my career. And we have some exciting projects that we're working on at 18 Million Rising, and we can get into that in a little bit.
Great. Thank you, Nate.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nate Kaplan. I'm the founder of C Political. C Political is a nonprofit 501c3 media company, and what we do is produce short animations that explain ballot measures in the political process. So you remember Schoolhouse Rock back in the day? Well, this is a modern-day version of Schoolhouse Rock. So I'm originally from Massachusetts, where I worked in the Massachusetts State Senate. I was a probation officer at Boston Juvenile Court. I ran for office 10 years ago for the Assembly of Massachusetts. Won the primary but couldn't win the general, so what do? When you lose, you come to California and try a new life. And I moved here in 2007, started working for the Los Angeles City Council. I was a communications director, a legislative director, and a district director. And I came up with the idea of C Political when I got a call from the LA Times, and they wanted to know how my boss, Bill Rosendahl, many of you might know, was going to vote on the ballot that year. Bill was the first openly gay elected official in LA history, and that was the year Prop 8 was on the ballot in 2008. So I get this thing for the first time. Does this look familiar to you? Public enemy number one, as far as we're concerned, why people don't vote and aren't engaged. They're not going to want to read text-heavy guides. So I'm reading through this thing, and I figure out how Bill's going to vote on everything before we call the reporter back. We get to Prop 8, and he says, I'm voting yes on Prop 8. I'm voting yes. And I said, no, Bill, you're voting no. He goes, why would I vote no if I want yes, if I want gay marriage to be legal? And I said, well, yes means no, and no means yes. And he said, show me a video that proves it, because I can't read this guide. And we couldn't find a single video that was unbiased. So that whole experience really stuck with me, and we started creating these short animations, which is starting to grow now. And it's been hosted on several media channels like KPCC and ABC and Univision. We make these things multilingual so everybody has an opportunity to understand what's on their ballot without having to read through a 100-page voter guide. So that's me. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Oscar.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to say thank you very much for having us here today. It's a pleasure to be here and have this discussion today with you. My name is Oscar Menjivar. I was born and raised in Watts, and after that, I was able to go to college and become a successful entrepreneur in the technology space. We decided about 5-6 years ago to start an organization called TXT, which stands for Teens Exploring Technology. What we do is we empower young Black and Latino males to become technology entrepreneurs. How we do it is we teach them how to code, we teach them design thinking, and we teach them how to launch apps. They usually pitch to investors, they pitch to companies like Google as well. One of the awesome components of the program is that they get a chance to really be empowered and build confidence to change their communities. A lot of the apps that they build are social conscious apps and apps that will change a community in one way or another, or an issue that they're passionate about. For example, about 2 years ago, when the mayoral election was happening, one of the kids decided to build what they called upolitic.me. And what upolitic.me was a chance for teens to express who they would vote for if they would have a chance to vote. And what they did was they launched this in 5 different schools around Los Angeles and gave kids a chance to vote for the mayor during that time in Los Angeles. So it's a program that we're encouraging people to make change through technology and really be conscious of how technology can change communities as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sumi Parekh. I'm going to talk a little bit about a startup app that hasn't launched yet in LA, so if you haven't heard about it, that's about right. But this is kind of a side job that I'm doing. I actually work for the Mayor's Fund for Los Angeles. We work side by side with Mayor Eric Garcetti's office on connecting the private sector to the public sector. I work on several initiatives, including Save the Drop. I don't know how many of you have seen a little drop character. It's the city of LA's big water conservation campaign. We are in a 5th year of massive drought with no El Nino in sight right now. So we are really kind of on the ground doing a huge marketing and outreach campaign with this little guy named The Drop, who tells Angelinos what they can do on a day-to-day basis to conserve water. We work with businesses throughout LA. We work with neighborhood councils, several nonprofit organizations to really teach Angelinos how they can conserve more water. It aligns with Mayor Garcetti's executive directive launched last year, where the goal is by 1/1/27 to cut down water usage in LA by 20%. We're also starting to work with cities of Pasadena, Culver City, Santa Monica, and several other cities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Juan Vasquez. I am a communications and data analyst with the Mayor's Operations Innovation Team. And so my team is a direct result of the Mayor's commitment to multi-sector collaboration and really bringing storytelling and analysis into the way we make decisions as a city. So that's what I spend my days doing. My career started in advertising, and it's taken turns through politics, nonprofits, the tech world, and now in government. And the uniting theme is digital strategy and using the digital space to not just build movements and community, but add bandwidth to efforts already in place. So I hope to share some of that with you today.
Great. Thank you, Hunter.
So my name is Hunter Scarborough. I am the CEO and founder of Voter. If you haven't heard of Voter, Voter is essentially what I'd call Tinder for politics. So you swipe on political issues, and then based on your results, we match you with political candidates who support your views, and specifically have a track record to support that. So we have a lot of amazing partners that we work with to make sure that candidates' views have basically that candidates have a track record again of supporting the same things that you believe. Partners include Google Civic API, GovTrack.us, Sunlight, the Sunlight Foundation, Open Secrets, basically trying to take this overwhelming thing that is the political field and break it down and make it super fast, super easy. I'll probably end up reiterating a lot of what Nate says because we kind of do a similar thing where we're trying to take this, I think, very overwhelming and complex process and break it down for a shorter attention span. And I'll just say, you're going to hear this again, but a statistic I heard recently, or not so recently at this point, but basically last year, 2015, the average attention span was 8 seconds. That's especially kind of funny because it's 1 second less than a goldfish. So a lot of people would say that's a negative. I'm not so sure it's a negative or positive, whatever it may be. Whatever the case, it's the reality of the situation, right? So we need to basically figure out ways to make politics engaging enough and deliver valuable information in a really short time frame. That's what Voter's about. For some people, it's just a starting point. For others, they may vote based off it. And the amount of information you're getting out of that 30 seconds to 2 minutes that you spend in the app is a lot more than the average individual is going to get doing that research on their own. So yeah, I look forward to sharing a little bit more about that with you guys.
Great. So I wanted to kick off the conversation here with a statistic. I was doing some data research, and during the 2014 general election here in LA County, the voter turnout for 18 to 24-year-olds was 7%. 7% of eligible 18 to 24-year-olds during the 2014 general election showed up to vote. So Nate, I'm going to toss this to you. What's going on? What do you make of sort of the trend line here, especially in LA County?
Yeah, LA County and California was about 8%, so not too much better throughout the state. It's indicative to the way of how millennials consume their information now. I teach a course, we'll get into this a little bit later, at USC and at Otis College of Art and Design, and if you ask any 18-year-old to, hey, go read this and figure out how you're going to vote, they're gonna laugh at you. They don't want to, and I don't even think a 75 or 80-year-old person, certainly my aunt and uncle out here, do not want to read through a large voter guide. So we're in the digital age right now. People expect their content to be on their phones, on their computers and their laptops, and they don't want to have to spend hours trying to translate legalese to make an educated decision. So it's the way we communicate and the way we deliver this information that is failing on an official level. So what we're trying to do is bridge that gap. And because millennials actually do more community service and volunteer work than any generation in American history, yet vote less than any generation in American history. So it's not that they don't want to participate, it's that they really don't know how, and they don't want to make an uneducated decision at the ballot box, so they're not showing up.
And tell us what we know about historically how this has changed. In previous generations, were young people more likely to vote than they are now? Is it as bad as the 7% seems?
I don't have stats off the top of my head, but yeah, in general, yes. And civics education has been defunded in K through 12 schools since the 70s. And there's been obviously a big increase in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, which is very important. But to graduate from a California school, you only need 1 semester of civics education. So you're packing everything, 3 branches of government, separation of powers, state, local, federal, election, all into 1 semester. So students aren't learning about how their government works. So it's almost a foreign concept for them. So they're not participating because they really don't feel comfortable doing it.
Oscar, you want to jump in?
Yes, with us, we work with teens ages 14 through about 21, so kids start very young, and we poll them, and before we had this conversation, we start asking about 20 kids, how are they going to vote, or what are they going to go vote for? Do they know there's an election happening? And overwhelmingly, a lot of the answers that the kids had was, well, one, where do I register to vote? So no one has ever told me how to register to vote. So I think that's something that, as a nation, also as in California, we need to address, or in LA County, is just having the kids say, go vote. This is the address where you can go register to vote, or you can vote, or you can register before you become 18. So that way, once you graduate high school, you can go ahead and vote, or you're eligible to vote. So those conversations are not happening at the high school level. What we did is we decided that we were going to create a domain that redirects over to the registration page, and that's calivotes.com. So calivotes.com. And the reason we did that was because it's very simple to memorize, very simple to tell somebody, go to calivotes.com, and it will redirect you to that website where you can register to vote. So just have simple access and information at your fingertips is very important for them. So I would say that we just got to make accessible, maybe at one point require kids to vote, to register to vote. And the reason I say that is because at a high school level, once you get out of high school level, apply for FAFSA, for financial aid, you have to register to go into the military. But yeah, there's nothing that says this is how we can register to vote. So I would say that's what we're finding out.
And as a side note, we're the only democracy in the world where you have to actually register to vote. You have to go through that extra step, that process when you turn 18. Fortunately, we passed the Motor Voter Act here in California. That'll change in about 3 or 4 or 5 years, depending on when it can get implemented.
And let me have you, for those who don't know, explain the motor voter law, how that's going to impact. This is the DMV law.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, when you get registered to get your driver's license, you'll be automatically registered to vote unless you opt out. And Oregon is the only other state that does that right now. And so hopefully the rest of this country follows suit.
And that's being rolled out, as I understand it. June is sort of when VoteCal, this new online registration system, is fully rolled out, and that'll start the process for the DMV law. So it's still many months away before it'll go into effect.
I think they're saying 2017, maybe 2018 now, because the DMV has to get its act together.
Very good. Could you, Nate, I know that you brought a video that you've been working on with your college students. Tell us a little bit about this process and show us the video, if you don't mind.
Great. Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, we teach a course at the Otis College of Art and Design, which is a great school right near LAX, where a lot of the students will learn about the political process for the first time and actually use their animation skills to produce content for public consumption. The first semester we did this in 2014. They learned about ballot measures and produce 4 2-minute or so animated ballot measure videos and explainers that got on news broadcasts for ABC and Univision up and down the state. This semester, with the presidential coming up, we focused on that process, and the video we're going to show now is explaining how the primaries and caucuses work, and we're releasing the video they did next week about electoral college and how that functions. So this was done where the students each week would come to our studio. I and a few other people, we had someone from the mayor's office come by and explain how elections work. and what that process is. We play different games and really try to make it experiential, because these are art and design students we're talking about here. They're not exactly political science whizzes, and we don't expect them to be. So they're learning from scratch. And we work with an incredible animation and production design studio called Imaginary Forces. So their directors and producers actually help teach the creative process in the class. So these students are in a real world environment in a place where they would like to eventually get a job. So it's a win-win-win. They create content for See Political, which goes to the public. They learn about the political process, and they get real world experience in an incredible animation studio where a lot of them want to eventually work at some point.
Great. Let's take a look. It's really nice. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about what did you work with the students on during this process? How did you make it effective? How do you make a video like this effective and really work?
Yeah, so we spent the first 3 weeks really teaching them what primaries and caucuses and the national conventions and everything, what they really mean. And I had to spend the summer boning up on it myself, because I had to remember we had USC students and a University of Redlands student actually help with some of the research. And then I make up all these kind of crazy games I like to teach when we do workshops in classrooms. So, you know, we had them do mock elections and go through the process themselves about how the political process works. And then they actually wrote the script. And so that took a lot of guidance, and they learned about it. They said, well, we think this script works, and we have to make some tweaks and some changes, make sure it fits in the time parameters. And then it starts with style frames, and then it goes on to storyboards and animations and voiceovers. We do everything in Spanish at least as well, and that's not an afterthought. We approach everything to make sure that everybody can understand these. And we also were hoping to expand it to other languages. We've done Farsi in the past too, which has been interesting. So the students go through it a full semester, and after a semester, we split that group of 12 students into two groups. So one was the primaries and caucuses, the other was the electoral college group, and then two from each one split off about halfway through and designed a comic book explaining the process. It goes into more depth and has some history behind it, and we'll be releasing that comic book in about a month. It'll be a downloadable PDF, which KPCC is welcome to host on its site and share with the public. So it is quite a process, and when we go through this production, we're totally unbiased and nonpartisan. We have to, or it doesn't work, or we're just another advertisement. So everything from the script to even the voiceover actors, making sure the tone of voice isn't right, go up at the wrong time, or if there isn't any, like a sigh, you have to really pinpoint and vet everything that goes into that production process so the animation is clean and worthy for public consumption.
I want to open this up to everyone now. In terms of what works, when we talk about how to engage the younger generation, how to engage millennials, what are you seeing this election cycle that works?
I'll jump on that. I'm just going to say that I don't think that you have to respect people's time. And I think Nate's videos are a good example of that. They're short, they're quick, they're engaging, they're fun. Again, respecting someone's time really means not expecting them to make the leap, but making that leap for them. So that's really what we're trying to do with Voter. I think we're actually going to be featuring some of your videos in the app soon, right? So I think it comes down to, really making sure that you understand that the time and the patience that people have allotted for politics, most people grossly overestimate. When I say most people, I mean most people in politics grossly overestimate the amount of time that anyone among the general population is willing to dedicate to it. And so it needs to be fun, it needs to be fast-paced, it needs to be engaging. This election cycle in particular I think is really interesting because it's, I would argue, probably the most publicized election in the history of the United States. And for different reasons, you are seeing increased engagement. And it might not be exactly for like what everyone would hope that it's for, but I think there is a silver lining there, right? Where you're getting people that wouldn't necessarily be watching debates. And so you can kind of dissect that as to why that might be, and maybe remove the negative aspects and look at what the positive things are that are bringing them into that. Yeah.
Very good. Oscar, did you want to jump in there? Great.
Just to add, it's all about experience, right? Creating a pleasurable experience that everybody, young and old, really wants to have when they vote. Why does it have to be such a drudgery? You know, we should make this inclusive and easy to do.
What we're finding when we're asking the youth, though, why they're interested in politics or why do they want to listen more, it's, believe it or not, a lot of them are saying, like Hunter was saying, the memes, right? They're very fast. And a lot of times that might be funny, be like, oh, this is not something that we should be using in politics. But that's how a lot of these kids are getting their information, was online, on their phones, through memes. And they're believing this, or they're reacting to it, and they're getting involved because of what's happening online. The other big comment that we're receiving on how to engage them, or people are saying this is how we wish to receive the information about politics or for candidates, is through YouTube live streaming. That's a lot of things that doesn't happen. Currently, it's not happening. So they get a lot of media. You won't find a 18-year-old or 16, 17-year-old who's going to sit down in front of the television and watch this long debates, but they will sit down to watch a live stream YouTube channel and get their information there.
Juan and Taz, I wanted to throw this question out to both of you. When we look at different demographics, are there some demographics that are more or less engaged when we look at young voters? What's your sense of sort of, the way information is getting out there during this election cycle?
Yeah, so for communities of color, particularly in the Asian American community, I think one of the things that we've really been grappling with is the mainstream community has parents that go and vote. But when it comes to the Asian American community, most of them are immigrants. Most of them don't speak language. If I went to my mom and asked her, to explain something that was in that complicated book, she wouldn't be able to explain it to me. So there's definitely this home education gap that's happening. Then there's the school education gap that's happening. And then it's people, I'll speak on behalf of the Asian American youth community, particularly for that community, there's a very large disconnect. So a lot of the work that we have to do as organizers isn't just to educate Asian American voters and Asian American youth voters, it's also to kind of bring them into the culture of voting and into the culture of politics. Because, you have to remember that as immigrant communities, a lot of these Asian American parents are from countries where they've had very violent experiences when it comes to the voting process. So we have to make that comfort for them as well.
Makes sense. Juan?
So I moved from Colombia when I was 11 years old. And during what turned out to be roughly a 13-year process to become a citizen, the main drivers were access to opportunity, getting access to certain jobs, and also not getting deported. Like, that's a huge motivator. Along the way, I was a tourist, a student, I had more immigration status than Baskin-Robbins has flavors. And at no part of that process, though, was voting a motivator for going past the green card. I was actually a permanent resident for about 2 years. So for 2 years, I could have been voting, but it just never clicked. And there's people in my immediate circle, in my family, that just don't see the value. I actually looked at some numbers. In 2012, I did check my hand just a second ago. In 2012, there were about 8.8 million people that were eligible to be naturalized citizens. They were resident aliens of this country. The only thing that was different, they had a green card instead of a passport. The following year, 2013, only 780,000 actually naturalized. So what I find really interesting is that we have some narratives going around deporting close to 11 million people. Imagine if in a year, instead of deporting 11 million, 8.8 became eligible voters, and by most legal standards, the equivalent of anybody else in this room. And I think that's a really important part of the immigration story that we're missing about, and plays to the points that the panelists have also brought up. And I just hope that, my family, for example, calls me and asks for advice on how to vote. I have a younger sister, younger cousins. We have a responsibility to educate those that are now older than us, that are still residents or just choose not to participate. And I think that's a trend that will be growing in importance as we move forward.
So let's talk about how the presidential campaigns are reaching out to younger voters and what that process has been like. Oscar, I know that you brought some examples you're going to walk us through. You want to explain what that is?
Yeah, so the example that I'm going to walk you through today is Snapchat, how some people are using Snapchat the right way, and some people who are running for office are using the Snapchat the wrong way. What we're finding right now is that all candidates, I should say, are using Snapchat the wrong way.
And we should explain for those who don't know what Snapchat is.
Yeah, so I mean, Snapchat, you basically tell your story within 10 seconds. You film it, you put it out there, people listen to you, people can follow you, you can tell your friends to follow you. But there are stories that exist online for maybe for 24 hours and then they disappear. And a lot of the kids are using this. I mean, this is an app that is being used primarily by people who are under 25 years old. We talked to Snapchat and we asked them, who's the most people using this. They say if you're hitting 30 years old, you're too old to use Snapchat. So it's between 25, younger population to 25 years old. So it's a very quick way, going back to Hunter, to get information and get your story out there. And people are, just viewing the stories online.
Great. So let's take a look at what we have here. Can you see it, Oscar?
So, for example, this is a screen capture. Hopefully they don't get upset at me when they see that I have a screen capture, but you get to see who screen capture your snap. But this is a screen capture from the Hillary campaign. And what we saw during that time, that week, was a lot of Bill Clinton going at the campaign and signing things and speaking to the camera. So we didn't see her as much as speaking to the camera or having the phone on her hands and being able to do that. Now, I completely understand that a presidential person might not have the time to do that, but if somebody is doing a strategy for them, and you see a lot of times in TV where the candidates are taking pictures with other people, there's an opportunity there to be more personal. And what Snapchat does is it becomes a personal story, so you get to know the person in a real kind of life scenario. So this is one of those pictures, and then the next one. So this is to me, it's very funny because this is for Bernie. And what's happening here that I see a lot with the candidates that I follow, and I follow almost all of them on Snapchat just to see what's happening online, is that it's from far away. It's almost like a third person or some random person taking pictures of them or saying, look what Bernie's doing, look what Hillary is doing, look what Trump is doing, look what, just Kasich is doing. But no one is really taking ownership of their narrative. No one's really taking ownership of their story online. I think it's important that they start doing that because the message that's being sent to the young people is, I don't have time for you. I'm just going to have somebody else do it for you. So if you follow me, somebody else is going to tell you what I'm doing. But what a beautiful thing would it be, and how engaging would it be if a candidate would say, oh, look, right now we're at Iowa, right now we're in Massachusetts. I'm knocking on a door of a person. And that might take time, a few seconds, but it engages the audience, engages these kids to say, this is a real person who's running for office, and they care about what I think about them. So the next one, again, it's having a meeting. To me, I go back and say, why couldn't he?
Is this Bernie?
This
I
is
can't
Bernie.
tell.
Yeah, you
Okay,
can't
this
tell,
is
right?
Bernie.
So you can't tell, but why couldn't he say, today we're going to discuss X, Y, and Z, right? And pass that around. That would have been great because now I'm part of the conversation. Now I'm part of that conversation. I get the information myself as well, not from a third party, but you are giving me that information. You're bringing me into your life, into your campaign as well. This is Hillary. So this is Hillary. So this one, it's like whoever's doing their social media campaign and they're Snapchatting, it's not even part of their campaign. You can, it's not even someone who's close to them very well. You can barely see them. Maybe they didn't get a ticket on time to get into that conference. But that's what's happening at this point right here. And it's important, again, that they're the ones telling the story. I feel that it's an opportunity being missed by them, by all of them, in the sense that the media, the general media, CNN, Fox, and all these big channels are telling their story and doing nice little sound bites. They have an opportunity to have sound bites, their own sound bites on Snapchat, and be personal with it, but no one is using the medium in this way.
Is it better almost to stay off of Snapchat if you're not doing it correctly? What's your take on are candidates missing by that much?
I think that I'm not sure if it's better to not be on Snapchat, but I do think that you're not owning your story, and the kids or the millennials who are looking at these stories are not able to connect with you. So I think that's what's important. I want to connect. Millennials want to connect. They want to know who you are. For myself, I like to, if I meet Hunter today, I'll probably follow him on Snapchat if he lets me, but I get to know, maybe he has a puppy, and I get to know that about him. I get to know the person that he is as much as he lets me know during that time.
Can I jump in on that?
Yes, please.
So you asked if it was maybe beneficial for them not to even take a chance on it. I was thinking about that when you were showing those. I was thinking, because there's about 9 ways to do it wrong and 1 way to do it right. The thing is the 9 ways to do it wrong, for the most part, are pretty low risk, low reward. So it's almost like, why not try it? But I mean, what they're doing there is, like you said, Snapchat's Gen Z, right? It's like young voters, right? What they're doing there is just, I mean, I'm really curious how many people are following them. I think that they're following, I'm just going to take a wild guess here, but is really going to be people 30, 40 and up who downloaded Snapchat in order to follow the candidates to see how they use it. Like, I really doubt that kids are following the candidates, because if I followed them and took a chance on that and I saw that, I would just be like, what is this? I don't. Yeah, I think that I agree though. There's a real opportunity there. There's a real missed opportunity if they gave the phone to a kid and said, hey, follow me closely, be my right-hand person, show me what it's like behind the scenes. There's a lot of celebrities out there that have actually impressively used social media. A perfect example is the former governor, right? Arnold Schwarzenegger. You guys might be familiar with Periscope. Periscope takes the recency of Snapchat 1 step further, right? So it's, instead of just something that just happened, it's something that's happening live. So you basically stream live video to as many people as are willing to watch. And Arnold, being a good example of this, will do that at live events that he's at backstage. You'll get to see a different perspective than you ever would have otherwise. I haven't seen a single candidate really utilize that to that extent yet.
Yeah, the one thing I said, to your point about young people are not watching them, and maybe the older people are seeing them on Snapchat. My take on that is also that why, if I'm a young person and I'm not getting what I need, why would I even watch you? There's no reason for me to be watching you. But now the way that this platform works is most of the time it's kids tell kids. So that 18-year-old is going to tell somebody else and say, hey, have you seen Hillary? Have you seen Bernie doing this stuff online? You should follow them. That's how this is working, and that's how people are starting to know who's good on these stories, right? But you're able to tell your story. If it's not something that they want to engage with, they're not going to watch no matter what platform they're on.
That makes sense. And you have some examples of someone who's doing this well, I believe.
Yes. So he just started. I won't mispronounce his name. He's a congressman from Texas, Beto O'Rourke. You guys can look him up. And he actually it was really, really cool to see him use Snapchat, because he was telling the story. I mean, he went from eating breakfast in the morning to crossing the border into Mexico when the Pope was here, and telling that entire story and talking about how important it was for him to be at that event during that time. So he's one that I've seen to use it very personal, very, very, this is who I am. We're going to this person's house. We're going to ask them what are their policies that they're interested in. We're asking them. So when somebody, who watches him tell somebody else, you should follow them and you should see what they're all about, it gets them into their actual home, right? It gets into their own personal life. Now, in the future, if I see that I like this person and somebody's going against them, I might go and vote for him. I might be able to say, you know what, I know this person. I get to know this person. I think the good thing in other states is that people get to talk to candidates, like at the coffee shops, and they go to visit. In California, I mean, one of the last time we saw somebody at the coffee shop and just say, hey, how you doing? But this is a good way to, I think, that the millennials or the young kids who are becoming eligible to vote are saying, we want to get to know them. We want to know who they really are. If not, I cannot connect with them. Just a public announcement, if you guys are on Twitter, we're at UrbanTXT. Just wanted to say that in there.
And I'm going to do a quick plug for Mayor Eric Garcetti as well. So I don't know if you guys have checked out his social media, but he, I think, is another great elected official that demonstrates how to utilize it correctly. Follow him on Instagram. He manages his own social media. His staffer, we have our LA mayor's handles, but the mayor has his own social media. He does Instagram, he has his own Facebook, and he has his own Snapchat as well, which he just got last year. And just by seeing that, you really get to know who he is. And he's a great Instagrammer. He's been at a couple art shows as well where a few of his Instagram pictures have been featured. So please check him out. I think he does a great job of that.
He also can break dance really well, play
Yes.
piano, speak Hebrew, Spanish, English, and who knows how many other languages.
And Juan or Sumi, can you tell us a little bit about his strategy? I mean, are there young Snapchat minds that are helping him? How does this all work?
So to be honest, there are, but he does his own thing. So Snapchat, I think he met the CEOs like beginning of last year. He was kind of against Snapchat because it was a little bit too much for him. And Instagram, he really takes it to an artistic level. So he'll like take a picture of like a brick on a wall and everyone loves it. But for Snapchat, you really had to dive in and get to know him. So at first, for about a couple months, his comms team managed it, and then he got into it, and now he managed it completely on his own. We don't even have his password anymore. We don't know what he's doing, but it's really now his own strategy. He posts one probably once or twice a week, and the comms team has their own mayor's office Snapchat as well.
Juan?
Yeah, it's really interesting if you look just even outside of the walls of social media. Within City Hall, I've been there about 6 months, and you see a movement of younger folks that are more comfortable with technology, that are comfortable with sharing what's happening online, and you're seeing that in the positions that are being filled within our data department and different analysts kind of coming in and looking at the way operations work differently. And this is also, I think, symptomatic of something we're seeing in the election, where the community of technologies from around the country, they're deciding to contribute their skills to some of these elections. The Bernie campaign, for example, they had a bunch of somebody made up an emoji set specifically for the campaign. There are apps that have come out that are meant to kind of pair people that share, find friends that share the same political beliefs. And so it's cool to see this affinity and comfort with technology, innovation, and data happening within City Hall, but also seeing it be reflected in how people show support at a federal level for elections.
Yeah, and also another great aspect is connecting that elected official or candidate to the younger population. So for example, Mayor Garcetti, when they shut down the 101 for the 6th Street Bridge, he did a huge video with Roosevelt High School. Yeah. Do you remember? Yeah, in Boyle Heights, and it was called the 101 Slow Jam. It was like a slow, jazzy little beatbox thing that he did, and it took off. And it's because one of the biggest reasons he connected himself with the younger population. And there was some skepticism in the office that, oh, this thing isn't going to be a big deal, but people wanted to see it. They wanted to see, why is he singing with this band? And I had no idea the 101 was shutting down. And if you checked it out for those 48 hours that it was shut down or 72 hours it was shut down, there was no traffic because we got the news across.
So I want to move now and talk about apps for a moment. We've got a couple folks here who are working on innovative projects. So Hunter, if you don't mind starting us off, talking about Voter. I had the pleasure of doing a piece on Hunter a few months back on the Voter app, so we're interested to hear where it's at now.
So that was a lot of fun, by the way. We were actually doing a business plan competition at my alma mater, which is Chapman down in Orange County. And that went quite well. We tied for first, and we ended up winning the investment of a lead guy down there, which was a lot of fun following up on that. So everything turned out quite well, so thank you for that. But anyways, with Voter, to dive in a little deeper, like I said, it's about leveraging what I would call big civic data to maximum effect so that on the surface, things are very easy, very fast for you, the user. But under the hood, there's a lot going on to make sure that the value you're getting out of that is really strong, that the matches are accurate, that nothing compromises the integrity of the information, so that you can really just use the app and vote on that. Like I said, ideally it's a starting point, but it can be a standalone experience where, hey, I didn't have time to research the candidates. I'm going to swipe through these issues really quick. Yes, no, maybe so, right? Go through. I match with this candidate. Okay, great. I can go into the ballot box and I can vote confidently knowing that their track record supports what I believe. So, yeah, I think we have a video, right?
I believe we have a video to show of it. So this is an app that you can get from the App Store. It's available. And we have a video.
So that kind of gives you a cursory overview, right, of kind of how it works. Now, if I was sitting in the audience right now, my first thought would be, that's all well and good, but how do I know that I can actually trust the information that you're using? How do I know that it's not biased one direction or another? Or how do I know that, that I can really trust my results? That's a burden of trust that lies on our shoulders, and we're doing our best to address that with just transparency, the ability to drill down into your results and say, for those people that really are a little more politically curious, they can say, okay, I matched with candidate X, but why did I match with candidate X? And you can look and see, okay, candidate X had a track record that went like this, he vacillated on this issue, but eventually ended up strongly for or against. That is not part of the app at the moment. You can see right now where you stand on, which issues you agree on most, issues you disagree on most. I will note that it is in the App Store right now. We're only on iOS, but if you search voter on your iPhone, it'll come up. Would love to get your feedback on it. We put that, kind of first and foremost in the app. So if you have any pointers, we are always open to suggestions. But yeah, the basic idea is to make it fast, make it accurate, and give people confidence in who they're voting for, because I think everyone deserves that opportunity, and most people don't necessarily have the time to devote to do that.
Great, and just a reminder for everyone, we are going to be going to questions towards the end of the conversation, so weigh in on social media with the hashtag #HackTheVote. And now, Sumi, if you could talk us through ballot.
Oh, you have the clicker. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, Ballot has not officially launched in LA. Pretty much, we are a group of 7 of us spread across the US. Weirdly, we all went to elementary school together in Texas and somehow connected together 2 years ago, all working in city politics, and decided that we needed an app to better make people understand how to understand the municipal side of things. As Mary mentioned, we only had about a 7% turnout last year in the municipal elections, and we want to change that. So that's where our focus is for Ballot. So the question that we're all here to answer, and the question that Ballot is hoping to answer, is how can we get more people to vote, specifically on a city and county level? Our test city was Charlotte, North Carolina. This is where our founder, Amy Chu, works. She works in city government. She's worked on several campaigns, so we thought she had the best networking skills to really tackle the issue, get as many people as involved, so we could really do this right when we're building our prototype. We focused last year. We officially launched it, I think in October or a little bit earlier in the 2015 municipal elections for Charlotte, North Carolina. And just so you guys get an idea, Charlotte is about 792,000 people. It's not nearly as diverse as LA, but we thought it would be a good start to build a prototype. So we did about 28 focus groups with civic organizations, elected officials, candidates, and the community itself. You guys already know this, that's why you all are here, but these are pretty much the biggest issues that people had with the voting process from a city and county perspective. They didn't know anything about the candidates, they didn't know anything about the issues. They were confused. They were like, we had an election last year, why do we have one again this year? And then several of them decided that, I don't think I know enough about the candidates or the issues, so I'm not gonna go out there and vote. So from this, we concluded that low voter turnout doesn't mean that people are apathetic. They don't have that personalized information at their fingertips. They don't really know who the candidate is because they don't see the candidate, they don't talk to the candidate. So this is kind of where we started to develop our prototype. Our prototype, we have a website, getballot.com. It's still in development, but we're going to have an app and a website because we want people that don't have the smartphone capabilities to also be able to access it from public libraries, workforce centers, etc. Our app has 4 distinguishing features: a political alignment score, a candidate-generated profile. This is created by the candidate, him or herself, a personalized ballot, and an aggregated district-specific insight data. So some of the features is, there we go, user signups, pretty basic. Put your name, your email, where you live, and you can either put in the polling location you have or we pull it for you. We have candidate profiles, so this is where we kind of distinguish ourselves from other political apps. We work directly with the candidates. So in Charlotte, we worked with 502 different candidates, all on a city and county level, and we had them and their staffers generate their own profile. It's a very simple profile, but it's kind of, as Oscar was saying, it personalizes a little bit. They get to put their own picture. They obviously put who they are, who they're running for. This is a real person, by the way, in Charlotte. A quick bio, and then they can put their website and social media handles. But we thought a little thing as having like a personalized picture as your instead of your normal headshot kind of really gave you the day-to-day, kind of, you're like, oh, I'm sitting next to the candidate in this conference room talking to him. We also have questions similar to voter, but our questions are divided up into 3 components. We have the policy questions, basic, are you pro-life, pro-choice, do you believe in minimum wage, et cetera, et cetera. We also have very localized questions in terms of, do you believe that we should pave bike lanes? Do you think people should take more public transportation? So we really wanted people to be involved in the nitty everyday decisions that elected officials have to make, because we want the data that we grab from this usable for candidates and elected officials. We want them to be able to be an informal polling process for them. So instead of going through the money and the time of doing polling, we can be their poll for them. From here, so one more thing I skipped is we also have 2 other sets of questions. We have process questions, for example, did you vote last year? And we have demographic questions, are you single, are you married? We threw this in to our question listing because we found when we were doing our testing in Charlotte that people were getting bored or people were getting frustrated with having to answer so many policy questions at one time. So we threw in some easy questions to streamline the process. We were able to find from that people answered twice as many questions in half the time. So from there, you're able to get candidate profiles. One great thing about us is that the policy questions that the user is answered, the candidate has already answered themselves. So we are literally matching with a one-on-one matching algorithm to come up with this matching percentage. So for example, this user matched with John K. Powell Jr., the Republican, at 92%, which means every single 92% of the questions that the user answered was 92% of the same responses that John K. Powell gave as well. So that's kind of where we distinguish ourselves. We don't rely on third-party data. We rely on what the candidates or their staffers answer directly. And then we also are working on an election info component. This just tells you the whens and the hows to vote. It also has push-out notifications to remind you there's an upcoming city council election in this district. You need to make sure you're voting, or you need to register to vote by this date. And another great aspect is the data that we can pull. Now, this is focused on the voters themselves, but we also want the candidate, we want civic organizations, we want policymakers, elected officials, we want everyone to take this data and use it. And we have a great data scientist, Jonathan Whitmore, out of Silicon Valley, that's kind of developing this whole aggregated data tool for us. And we want them to be able to drive policymaking decisions by understanding the baseline of their community. Who this community is, do they really want me to pass this policy? Do they care about this policy? Or should I focus on this because 92% of the data is saying that people want the city to build more bike lanes. So we're hoping that we can use this for both the voters and the community as well. And that's it. So in terms of timeline for LA, Charlotte, and this is kind of one of the disadvantages of us, we have to go city by city because we're working directly with our candidates and our elected officials and the community around us. So what we're planning, because Charlotte is only 792,000 and we're about 4 million in LA, we're gonna start from scratch. We're gonna do about 25 focus groups from April through August. So if any of you are interested in being part of that, that's why I'm here, is to get people to help me. Please let me know, please find me after. If not, I will be asking you to join if you can. And then from fall and winter onwards, we're going to do beta testing of a prototype, which we will launch in September of this year. We hope to launch next year in time for the 2017 mayoral reelection.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges of getting these apps up and running. Hunter, I know when you and I spoke, you mentioned that a lot of investors you were pitching to were new to the concept, didn't know what Tinder was. It was a new idea. Talk about sort of the challenges of that.
Yeah, it's funny. If you ask 10 investors for their opinion, you'll get 10 different opinions. So when it comes to describing something as this for that, that's kind of a Silicon Valley cliche, but there's a reason for it, and that's because it gives you a lot of information in a very short time span, which is also kind of what we're about, right? So Tinder for Politics isn't probably the most accurate description, but it gives you the most information in the shortest amount of time. So when I'd say that to investors, there would be the occasional, obviously investors are typically, an older crowd by the time they have the type of money that they can invest in a sort of a startup. And yeah, sometimes they would be a little unfamiliar with it, and then I'd have to kind of reassess the situation. What I what I found kind of works no matter who you're talking to is if I ask them, hey, who are you going to vote for president? And I'm guessing, just about everyone in this room probably has someone in mind, or at least, two people that they're kind of between. If I say, who are you going to vote for your senator, for the senator of California, I'm sure the percentage of people that have someone in mind drops pretty significantly. If I say, who are you going to vote for your representative of your district, do you know who your representative of your district is? Suddenly we're getting probably a lot of blank faces, right? So that resonates with people. People realize that the more local you get, and this speaks to ballot, the more local you get, there's just a lack of information. It's very difficult. It's very time consuming. So I did sometimes, on occasion, switch from that Tinder for politics to, do you know who you're voting for District 33 representative, et cetera. I actually don't know off the top of my head what district we're in right now because I live over on the west side. But yeah, Pasadena's, I don't know if you guys are out here, if you know which district you're voting for, or who your representative might be in 2016. It's important, right? It's something that you want to know, but you don't always have the time to devote to that. So we want to bridge that gap.
And I'm glad we're having this conversation because it's something we bring up all the time is what goes on in our city halls and our state capitals is so much more impactful in our lives than what happens in Washington, D.C. It's sexier to talk about wars being waged and scandals in Washington, but is your street getting paved? Is your sidewalk cracked? Is there a bus lane? Is there even a bus? What are your kids learning at school? These are the issues that we're really trying to, I think, all stress that are way more important. And actually, in our decision-making capacity to vote, one vote can actually make a difference. A handful of votes can actually swing one way or another with their candidate or ballot measure on a local or state level, it passes. So to let people know that they're empowered to make these decisions that actually affect their lives probably 99% more than anything that goes on in Washington, D.C., even though that gets 99% of the coverage. We need to change that.
That makes sense. Switching gears a little bit, talking about language barriers. Taz, I was hoping you could walk us through VoterVox.
Yeah, I think we could show something first before I talk through
That'd be
it.
great.
So let's do that. That is VoterVox. We are also in the beginning stages. We are seeking funding. We're in the very, very beginning stages of that. But a lot of the big reason why we developed this idea was because the Asian American community is so limited English speaking. We kept trying to figure out what's that barrier that's keeping our community from voting. And language is one of the biggest ones. So we're here in Los Angeles, so luckily we do have voter registration forms that are in multiple languages, but that's because we have a really large concentration of Asian American voters in Los Angeles, and because of how the Voting Rights Act came about, when you look at your voter reg form now, you can see the languages. But the rest of the country doesn't have that. Most of the counties outside of LA has the largest. We have LA County folks here too. So LA County has the largest amount of, I believe, languages. I could be wrong. Yes, nationally. Yeah.
About 160, I think.
Or on the ballot, translated on the ballot. We have
spoken daily. Yeah.
I think the voter reg form has to be translated in 7 languages. Right. I'm looking. 9? 9. Right. It went up after the last census, so that was what I was missing. We added Thai and Hindi. So, anyways, the point is that when I was doing field work and I was organizing with Asian Americans Advancing Justice, we had to do our translation in 17 different languages because of how big the Asian American population was. We had to do it in Samoan and Tongan. We did it in Bangla. We did it in Urdu. And a lot of these languages have a very small percentage of people living in LA counties. But we had volunteers, and our volunteers that helped make these phone calls for us in these different languages were largely our high school youth. They were like high school youth who were able to talk to their parents back at home, but they could talk in English when it came to school. So when they were on the phones, they were our best navigators. They were able to navigate between languages, really figure out who was picking up the phone and move with that. And I think what's so great about VoterVox is we're taking that and turning it into an app. We're figuring out who are the volunteers, who are the youth in the community that can support the elders in the community who need this language support. So I'm really excited to see how this is going to pan out.
Great. So I want to do a quick run through of everyone, kind of a fire round here, and ask, we've been talking a lot about a lot of different ideas, but from what you know about young people, when we think about the future of voting, what needs to be different? What can we change? Hunter, I'll start with you.
So I'll try to bring up some new information here. So one thing that I think you were kind of talking about with ballot was how, this is something that I say all the time when I'm pitching the app, I say this a lot. So it's that uninformed voters don't vote, right? That's what you were saying, is that if someone doesn't know the information, they're not going to vote. And that's true. Uninformed voters don't vote. Or worse, they do, right? And so I think that's it's a really tough dilemma. I got an email right before this panel from someone in the audience, I think was what it was explained to me, right? Okay. So that was asking, okay, if I'm from this demographic and I kind of represent that demographic, and if I'm voting amongst 1,000 people, my vote counts quite a bit. But if I'm voting amongst 100,000 people or 1 million people, my vote counts significantly less. So just playing devil's advocate, why is it in my interest to make sure that more people are voting? It's a very legitimate question, but it's kind of one that needs to be, the way to answer that is basically looking at, if our democracy isn't stronger, if people aren't voting, our democracy weakens, right? And when our democracy weakens, the state of our society weakens. And when the state of our society weakens, everyone loses. So when there's democratic unrest, no matter what demographic you represent, you lose. So best case scenario, we'd have 100% voter turnout with people voting, and 100% of those voters being informed. The closer we can get to that, the better off we're going to be. So I hope that answers that individual's question who is out there. But yes, more voting and more informed voting specifically is key. I think Rock the Vote is really interesting to me. I mostly support them. But I've always thought that whole idea of, what are those campaigns like Vote or Die and stuff like that? It's really odd to me, because the idea of simply voting on its own should not be championed. It needs to be combined with knowing what you're voting on. And so that's, again, sort of what Voter is there to do, is to bridge that gap very quickly and very easily for a population that doesn't have the time to do that in the traditional way.
Juan, future of voting, what would you like to see?
I think people vote when it becomes personal, when something, unfortunately, usually has to make us kind of mad. It has to unsettle us, at least for engagement to be more permanent. So I think what needs to change is that governments need to be more thoughtful in how they create transparency and present data, something I think the city is on a path to really do. So you're not just dropping off these millions of rows and cells and columns and numbers and characters. Instead, you're telling the story and you're just sharing it, whether it's necessarily good or bad. So as this becomes more transparent, more accessible, it starts resonating, and it becomes something, it's not far away off land where a few usually older white gentlemen are voting on, but instead it's an issue that hits on my corner block. It hits my family members, my friends. That transition of dumping data for the sake of sharing information over to telling a consistent story that tells both the good and bad, I think that's when people are going to get more and more engaged.
Thank you. Sumi.
I think, honestly, not thinking everything needs to be polarized. I think we live in a very Republican and Democrat world, and I know one thing when we were looking at the prototype and studying the data, a lot of voters are starting to register as an unaffiliated party. They don't know if they're Republican. They may be somewhat Republican, somewhat Democrat, and me, for example, I'm pretty moderate. There are things I believe in on the Republican side, things I believe in on the Democratic side. So I think we need to start focusing more on the issues at hand, especially when you're looking at a localized level where Republican and Democrat don't play as big of a role as on the federal level. Really focus on the issues and less on forcing yourself to vote one way or the other.
Great. Oscar.
Yes, in terms of engaging young people, I think that there's this idea out there, at least that's how a lot of the young people that I talk to feel, which is that government officials and candidates don't care about them. They don't come and talk to them when they're running for office. And a lot of the idea comes from, well, I can't vote, so why should we talk to these people? Or why should we talk to the young people? And the reality is that these young people are now changing and they're starting to say, I need to vote. I'm trying to have more information. I have more information, whether it's good information or bad information, but they're getting this information, but sometimes they're getting the wrong information. And sometimes they're getting messages that says your vote doesn't count, right? That's because that's what they're hearing. And I think we need to change it from your vote doesn't count to it's important for you to vote for these local issues and keep pushing it at the local level that it is important to vote and the vote does count. The other point that I want to make in terms of counting young people, and I'm talking about, the 16-year-old, the 17, the 18, 19-year-old who wants to get engaged and who wants to vote and might one day think about voting and might get to the voting poll booth. It's that in the Latino community, what I've seen, and some of you guys may know this, may not, what I've seen is that our parents who have become citizens and our parents who maybe not as engaged in the voting process, the one person that they go to is their young daughter or the young son, and they ask, who should I vote for? So imagine that opportunity that officials are missing, that one 16-year-old, 17-year-old might tell 10 members of their families, go vote for this person. And because that kid might be able to influence that decision, they might get 10 different votes from people. And that does happen. That happened in my family, and it happened in other families that we've seen, at least in the Latino community. They say, who should I vote for? And the kids are saying, go vote for this person, if they know who to vote for.
Great, thank you.
Two things, Mary. First, we require a cultural shift. We are a culture based on media consumption. Content is king. So we need content that informs us, that's entertaining, and that is not going to bore us to death. #CPolitical. Second, our government is extremely underfunded when it comes to voter education. Our states and our counties and our cities do not have the funds necessary to educate. I was at a Future of California's Elections conference last Friday, and one of the panelists was someone from the Secretary of State's office who was asked how they're planning on funding a voter education campaign. And they said, well, we're applying to the James Irvine Foundation for funds. And the MC said, what, you guys don't have funds to do your own voter education campaign? And he said, no, well, a lot of people are applying funds for James Irvine. So our Secretary of States, our county registrars, our city clerks need more funding to do the job they're tasked to do. Or we can only expect if these two things don't happen, things aren't going to change.
Thanks.
Can I interject really quick?
Sure.
So what you said, the cultural shift thing, I think is really interesting. And I may be preaching to the choir here, at least those of you, a group that's going to show up to an event like this. But for those of you that are listening or watching, when you say cultural shift and that a cultural shift in the media, right? I think it's interesting. A lot of people don't talk about this, even though it's widely accepted, that the reason I think that the media doesn't really do the job that it's expected to do is because the incentives are really misaligned. So, I mean, it's clear, right? The media exists really to get ratings because that's where they make their money. And it's set up so that they have to do that. And that's why we see the scenario that we're seeing now where they're kind of projected as being this unbiased, useful source of information, but that's not actually what their incentives are. And we see that really, we kind of see the veil pulled back in this election in particular into just how deep that sort of misaligned incentive goes. But when you're speaking about a cultural shift, I think that's exactly right. There needs to be those misaligned incentives need to be somehow aligned. CPolitical, for example, is a nonprofit, right? I think in a lot of cases, nonprofits can be for-profits if they're creative, but in this particular case, it's tough to see how a media organization can truly do the job of informing people without, I guess, compromising that if they're a for-profit. I think it's that's a tough call, and I don't know the solution to it.
And thankfully, KPCC, that's not our model since we are a nonprofit. Different model for public radio. Taz.
What was the question again?
The question is, for the future of voting, what would you like to see change with everything that you know about the way that young people participate in politics?
I think the thing that I would like to emphasize is the need for micro-targeting, particularly when it comes to young voters and young voters of color. Young voters don't vote, but then young voters who are from communities of color even vote less. And when it comes to people of color that vote, they're voting at a much lower rate than every other, the mainstream community. So I think for that, one of the things that we've been really honing in on is like, how do you micro-target? How do you micro-target? How do you provide materials that are multilingual? How do you provide materials that are in culture? And I think there's ways to do in culture and in language micro-targeting in communities of color that can both be very minute, but also be pulled back and be very, very wide. And I think if we can figure out how to do that, that would be a big step.
Great.
And I think it's all about education. And 2 examples, if you mind, briefly. United States is the only place I've ever heard of where we have direct democracy. So when I speak to people from other countries, they often don't vote on ballot measures because they say, well, that's why I elect our mayor and our senator. We vote for them, but we don't vote on these ballot props. They need to vote on those. It doesn't happen anywhere else. And I remember listening to a story on KPCC back in 2012-ish, and you were asking, one of your reporters was asking a National Guardsman who was in Iraq at the time, how are you going to vote in this upcoming election? And he said, I don't know. I don't have access to information out here. He's like, I'm fighting a war. He's like, I don't have a voter guide. It doesn't get sent to me. And it's this educational component. We need to bring it to people. And now with the democratization through the internet, the costs can come down. So it's not infeasible. It doesn't take much. When you consider about $500 million is going to be spent in California alone during this election, you take 1% of that and dedicate it towards unbiased information, educational material for people of all languages, and people overseas. That's how you change things. It's a really shift in priorities as well.
Great. I really want to open the conversation up to everyone's questions here. If you have a question, we've got a lot here. We're going to get the mics out shortly. In the meantime, I'm going to read a couple of our questions from social media. And this is a really good one that's important to talk about. The question is, how do we bridge the digital divide? We've been talking a lot about the value of technology. Anybody want to take a stab at how we do bridge that gap with people who are, from different generations or have access issues due to poverty or other factors?
I just want to say real quick, I know Oscar has a wealth of experience in this realm, but I think we're at a point now where tech is so advanced that cities can really take ownership over where access gets to. Just bring free Wi-Fi to the cities, make it a priority. Over time, it will happen. Just slowly start baking it into your budgets. It will happen. No more excuses. A lot of metros do it, so I think it's just time.
Great. Anyone else want to add into that?
For me, again, it's back to content. You bring the information to where the people are. People in certain communities are more likely to be consuming the information on mobile devices. Others, where they might be reading a newspaper or on a computer. So you go where they are, and since less and less people are reading the newspaper and voter guides, and more people are getting their information digitally, we have to provide that to them.
Yeah, for the Asian American community, one of the things that we've realized is that to reach into the Chinese community, you need to be on Weibo. And this is how so much of the organizing has been happening in the Asian American community. But we, as we're kind of stuck to the conventional Facebook, Twitter, that kind of social media. So we need to understand what the different types of micro-ethnic communities also, they have different forms of digital too. So we have to figure that out as well. I would say less that they're not, I would say that there's that kind of a digital divide also happening as well.
Yeah, the flip side of it. That makes sense. Hunter, I'm going to toss this question to you from social media. How simple do we have to make things to get people engaged?
Very simple. So the way that we did things was you answer 8 questions. When I say 8 questions, right, you're swiping on 8 different cards, basically, before you actually see results. Now, for those of you that want to dive deeper, that you can dive deeper and answer more questions. So there's currently 60, or no, maybe I think there's 40 questions in the app. We have another 20 that we kind of have ready to release. So there will be 60 soon. We're going to go up to about 100, maybe 200, so that people can really dive in and get, basically the more questions you answer, the more nuanced, the more specific that they get. So it's kind of tailored to each individual. However politically informed you want to be, you can dive as deep as you want to go. But speaking to how simple does it need to be, again, like respecting someone's time, I think it's really important to deliver value and information quickly. And if they have more time to devote, great. Like the option should be there to drill down and go further, but don't assume that they do. That's the approach that we're taking.
Nate, did you want to jump in there?
That's for a majority of people. Hunter's right. There's a large percentage, a majority that want that very simplified. I think many of us in this room probably enjoy reading through and getting through that, getting into the facts and asking ourselves questions and talking to our friends and family about these issues, and that's great. The more of that happens, the better. But it's not a requirement in our democracy to have to go through that process. Anybody can vote as long as you're 18 and you're not a felon. It needs to be simple if we want to increase voter turnout. If not, then just we'll have a voting class of 10 to 20% of Americans.
I saw a lot of hands. I'd love to go ahead and bring in questions. Yes. And if you could just say your name before your question, if you don't mind.
Okay. Hey, my name is Dan. I was wondering if we can imagine, for example, at city level or at different level, for every election, that the city could use some sort of register, maybe the voter register, to use digital version to contact voters and to inform them about all those platforms that are being created to get the information out there, so that really it gets to people. Like all those young people will get the information if we notify them on the phones, on the platforms. Right now it's not happening, so I think all that momentum will take longer to reach if that's not done. Any thoughts on this?
I know LA County is working on this in some regards. Does anybody want to take that question?
So you're asking how would people know about the platforms that we're building, or?
What I was wondering is that maybe if the city is organizing an election, then the city, through the voter register or another register, could notify the customers, the voters, that this is happening, and instead of they're spending all that money on this, which is useless, just an email saying, hey, look, all those things are existing, just go, you'll find the information, to kind of build up on the momentum that you guys are creating.
Right. We'd certainly love the distribution, but Nate could probably speak better since he's been in the actual office, yeah.
It's difficult for them because they have to pick winners and losers. Like, who do you include? Because a lot of these groups are competing for money and for funding. So if a mayor's office was to say, go look at ballot instead of go look at voter or vice versa, then they're in a tough position there. So it's, playing devil's advocate, it's tough for them to be able to pick which ones to include and which ones not to. So often they decide not to.
So that means there should be a neutral version of that guide that's on there, no fiction one.
Right, which is what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and sorry.
So I was just going to say emails have a very low open rate too. So if you're suggesting sending out emails, they're not really going to get open, right? 10 to 20%. You send out text messages. There's a lot of legal issues around sending text messages. You need permissions. There's a cost associated. So figuring out how to reach people digitally is also a question that, we're grappling with at 18 Million Rising all the time. We're trying to figure out how do you create a catchy email header? How do you get people to visit your website? How do you get them to click on, a petition? So if we can figure that out too, that would be great.
I was going to say, from a City of LA perspective, we are toying with, we have a My LA 311 app, and this is all city departments, and we're all trying to kind of come together, and there is talks about incorporating city election info in that My LA 311 app. It's a great app. We've done a lot to it in the last 3 or 4 years, and we do want to add that before the 2017 municipal election. So stay tuned on that.
Great. Other questions in the back?
Ken Murray. Thanks for a real interesting panel. In the group of people who you might classify as professionals, I find that there's a distressing number of people who choose not to vote to avoid jury duty. And I'm curious whether you have picked up on that, or any of the panelists have picked up on that in the group that we're talking about, or is that just completely a non-issue?
I've heard that a lot, and if you get that question again, or if somebody says that, let them know they get signed up for jury duty when they register for their license, so their driver's license. So that's the straight up answer. But yeah, that does come up a lot for me. Another thing I hear is I vote no on every ballot measure because I don't want my taxes ever to be raised. Well, sometimes you're voting to raise your taxes when you vote no. So.
Other questions? We've got another question in the back here.
How you doing? My name is Justin Jones, and I had 2 questions for the panel. The first question is, what do you think about online voting? And if you're for it, how would we protect online voting? And then the second question is that do you think that local municipal elections should coincide with state and federal elections to increase voter turnout?
Before we answer that, could the panelists raise their hands? Who is in support of online voting in the future? Anyone?
Eventually.
Eventually?
I gotta say something on this.
Go ahead.
I can't say yes to that yet. And by the way, I'm a big tech guy. I love technology. I think is a way of future. But to the point that was brought up earlier, if marginalized communities don't have Wi-Fi and access to technology, and we can't get out there and vote even at that point in the future, then I would say that's the worst idea ever, because then we're gonna leave tons of people, even more people now than we have now, out of the voting process. So I would say no, if we don't solve even, this is probably another conversation, but if we don't solve net neutrality yet, which is access to the internet and free access to the internet, then why would we go online? That's a longer conversation than we can even start tonight.
Great. Other questions?
What, didn't he have a, so.
Yeah, feel free to jump in.
First off, I think online voting is an inevitability. I don't think it's a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right? Younger generations, I would say anyone under 30 probably isn't opposed to it for the most part. But like the older you go, people get really fired up about it. And I can understand why, because if you don't understand the technology behind it, you could be extremely distrustful. If banks can get hacked, then why not votes? Technology, for the most part, already exists to do online voting safely. It's really a matter of public trust. And when I say the technology, those of you out there might be familiar with Bitcoin. The same technology that powers Bitcoin is cryptography. That technology could make online voting very, very feasible. And there's a good number of companies that are researching that. But as far as what you were saying, I would actually think that online voting would benefit marginalized communities by a much greater margin than it would further marginalize them.
Only if they can afford data plans.
Well, and so the reality is also that by the time that online voting becomes a reality, that I think that the internet and data plans and free Wi-Fi, et cetera, will be a lot more ubiquitous than it is right now.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying that before we can go there, we need to make sure that happens first.
Sure, yeah. And sorry, wait. It's just, there was one other thing, right? It was, should municipal elections be added on? Just for the sake of increasing voter turnout, I absolutely say no, because getting people to vote for things, again, that they don't know about just because it's on the same day doesn't make a whole lot of sense logically. If they're only voting because they happen to be there, I think that's detrimental to the whole democratic process.
Yeah, and a technical aspect of that too is because everyone has different starting and ending term limits, it would be really hard to align all of them together. I don't know how we would do that, but yes.
And Los Angeles had Charter Amendment 1 and 2 that was voted on this March. And if you go to cpolitical.com, we did a video on that in English, Spanish, and Farsi, and 2 talking tacos will tell you what it's all about.
Very good. Other questions?
Hi, my name is David Whitehead. I want to thank Hunter for responding to the question that I emailed to you regarding why should I want more people to turn out. I appreciate that answer. My follow-up question is pretty much following up on the previous one, and that is, do you foresee a time in the future where we won't be so much a representative democracy, but a direct voting democracy, where we will vote on things directly rather than having the middleman of a politician?
California is certainly a leader. There's, I believe, 24 states that have voter-initiated ballot measures. 49, all except Delaware, can come from the legislature. I don't see any trend going towards that direction, personally, anything I've seen. I think where we're at now will probably be the extent of it for our lifetimes, at least. That's my opinion.
I'm going to disagree with Nate. I think in our lifetimes, by a wide margin, that we will become a more direct democracy, because technology certainly affords us that. But it may not be for a little bit, but I think absolutely for sure. Just revealing kind of some of our plans, Voter aims to be, to kind of bridge that link a little bit between issues and individuals. So let's say that, I guess I don't know how many months back it was at this point, but there was an anti-ride-sharing bill that went through the California state legislature, right? Basically an anti-Uber bill. And most, millennials, who's our kind of target demographic, didn't know about that. Yet it would affect most of them, right? So that's a really interesting dilemma where something that directly affects your life is potentially about to be limited or taken away by your government, and you're not aware of it. So that's something that we want to have an impact on, and saying, hey, your California state legislature is voting on this. How do you feel about it? Yes or no? We can send that information to your representatives. Basically becoming a bit of a referendum platform. So speaking to direct democracy, I think that'll increase maybe exponentially kind of as time goes on.
And one fun experiment, I remember last year, Assemblymember Mike Gatto had like a bill that he posted online that he allowed his constituents and people from the public to write the bill itself. So that was something cool. I've never seen anything so innovative, and I don't think it's happened since. But with technology, those things are more capable.
Great. Other questions? For here.
Hi, my name is Michelle Lapointe, and I think I have a two-part question. These are all really great ideas and sorely needed. My question is this. For anybody on the panel, do you have any way of knowing what of all of these strategies and tactics are actually moving the needle? And the second part, are you measuring any of this stuff to see if it's actually working to get people in your constituencies to vote more? And the second part is, these are not new problems. Is anybody taking a look at what has worked before? For example, in African American communities, getting churches together to get people to physically join together and vote, and incorporating any of these things into your systems?
Great question.
So I can say that the work that I was doing at Advancing Justice, doing multilingual work, is in a book called Mobilizing Inclusion by this awesome researcher named Lisa Garcia Badola. She does a lot of work in electoral politics when it comes to communities of color. So I would highly recommend checking that out. And I do think that when it comes to doing electoral work, and every campaign cycle is an opportunity to conduct an experiment and to collect data, and that's how we should be looking into this. So I'm looking forward to seeing how VoterVox will have an impact on turnout, and we will have things in place where we can potentially measure that.
Anyone else been able to measure results?
From the poll that we did, we have seen this year that kids are more excited about what's happening in the presidential election. So we actually have seen that happen. They're asking questions. They want to get involved. They want to know how to get involved. We have the system in our organization is an app called Kick, and in Kick you see a lot of kids talking about where should they go vote, how do they vote, what's happening. So I think that giving them quick information, 10 seconds, 8 seconds information, that's going to move the needle at least for the young kids. I think they're starting to question it a lot, and they're starting to ask, is this true? Or if it's so-and-so speaking, are they saying the truth? Where do I go get more information as well? So I think as we move forward with the technology and the fast access to technology, these kids are going to get involved a lot quicker than we think.
On a micro level, we'll find out soon. We're hired by Culver City because they had very low turnout in their local races, 14.5% in their last city council race, to design a voting mascot that they'll use in perpetuity, and animate 2 PSAs about how to become a poll worker, how to register to vote, when election day is, because it's in April, it's an off month. So most people aren't used to their 39,000 residents to voting on that date. So we'll see post-April election if that needle moves through our efforts. So we'll hopefully have some good news to report in May.
And I don't have the results of Charlotte yet. We have about 5,000 people that have downloaded and used the app. We do have a push-out notification, though, that sends a reminder saying, did you vote? And it's just a simple yes or no. And so for us, that would be a way to see if we're actually having somewhat of an impact or not.
Great. Other questions? Yes, back here.
Hi, my name is Jorge Garcia. I actually lead a project called Voto Social. And what we built is a blockchain technology, an e-voting platform over the blockchain. And mentioning on what it helps is you could actually have a public auditable log of the voting, so you could follow like policies if somebody has voted on what you like. And also in other democracies, it will help trust a little bit more the system. But one of the questions that I have is if we have, for example, a working prototype, but how do you approach and what organizations do you approach if you have a project like this and you want to go to the next step and make it real in the terms of being implemented for something that is real in the democracy?
Mm-hmm. Anyone want to share their own experiences?
Well, I don't have my own experience to share, but I would say that the best, if I were in your shoes, the route that I would take is testing it out and proving it in extremely low risk scenarios. So, and then kind of building from there. So like, if you could use that in, I don't know, reality TV shows, on like voting that they do for when they ask audience members to select someone as a winner, if they could use your platform, that would be a good sort of proof of concept to then take to maybe a local race and then build from a local race to a district. And that's how I would do it.
I would also say talk to your city officials, talk to your county officials, see if they want to help endorse it, push the word out.
Cities and smaller governments are moving towards more solution-based decision-making. There's an interesting model called City Mart, and basically allows cities to present forward their problems and allow people from the community to crowdsource back actual technical solutions. There has to be a municipality out there that's asking the question, how can we get more people to come out to vote? So go find City Mart equivalents and see who's already asking that question and see if you can answer it.
Great. Other questions? Yes.
Hi, thank you KPCC and thank you panel. And this event is reason enough that everybody out there should subscribe tonight to KPCC.
That's very nice.
So before the 08 Obama victory, they did this very detailed study about what works in GOTV in getting out the vote, right? And at the top was canvassing followed by phone banking, followed by mailers and TV and radio. And then the web is part of that. But the most effective we know is talking to people. I do that every day, just about. I canvass every day because I think it's so important to get people to vote here in Los Angeles. And most of the people I talk to are college students, millennials, and they really care and they want to be heard, not just talked to. And what the other fundamental part about this, getting out the vote, is rule number 1 in campaigning is ask for the vote. So I always ask people to vote, and by the time I'm done talking to them, they're talking about their friends that they're going to bring to vote with them. And so that's very fulfilling to me. And what I want to ask is, how could we use this great technology that you're talking about to create more face-to-face opportunities of asking people to come out and vote with us?
Great question.
I mean, I think that still holds true, that the one-on-one connection that you have with your voter is what turns people out to vote. I think what we have now is we have an opportunity to use digital technology to do that. I think a lot of the apps that have been discussed are also, there's a one-on-one personal connection, but then there's voter education, because voters do need to get educated. It's not just about the connection. So that's what's being accomplished. What I think is really kind of cool is about like Snapchat is that with Snapchat, you can actually feel like you have that one-on-one connection with this person without really having that one-on-one connection. You can achieve that with Twitter. You can achieve that with podcasts. You can develop this trust with your audience, and you're able to have kind of this weird one-on-one connection through being very personable, I guess.
Yeah, and I also think for young people, today we have 3 of them who came with us. We would have brought more. We don't have the transportation to bring them to events like this, but they want to be involved. And the reason they want to be involved is because if they're seeing something online, let's per se say they saw a YouTube video online that they loved about a candidate, they're going to share that YouTube video again, and then they're going to tag their friends and re-share that YouTube video again and get lots of likes through that YouTube video. And to me, it's really, just strange to know that none of the candidates, the presidential election or any candidates, ever use YouTube. I mean, it's, they complain about not having access to media or having enough hits, But this is free. This is like something you don't have to spend money on. You just got to put it out there and see who gets more hits. Or there's also tools like Google Hangouts, right? Like imagine a candidate said, look, tomorrow night we're going to have a Google Hangout. Let's see how many people we can get to have a personal discussion. Let me answer questions from you and see what you care about. That's, I think, where this needs to move into, to engage young people.
Great. Other questions? Oh, right in the middle here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mel. Thank you for this great discussion. But I wanted to follow up on the social media question about how simple it has to be. That was mine. And the flip side I see is the simpler you make it, doesn't that trouble you that in order to engage younger people, you have to basically dumb down the process so that people understand it and you can't stoke their interest some other way so that they actually educate themselves on the issues? That's really kind of my problem with the discussion about making apps so simple and Nate, your videos, which are fun and entertaining, but someone who's 18 to 24 should be able to digest larger issues, at least, if not the mundane. I'd like your comment on that.
I mean, a lot, it starts at home. So what are our parents teaching their children? Are they bringing them into the process? And the next step is in our schools. Are our educators doing enough to make sure students are able to analyze issues and ask that next question? That's something we do in our class, and we try to build those analytical tools with our students, so they know that this 1-2 minute video, isn't enough to get a full breadth of the issue. But there has to be a starting point, and our culture right now in 2016, that starting point is a short amount of information.
Just because information is shorter or it's quicker, easier to digest, doesn't necessarily mean that it's not as wholesome, right? So if you look at that voter guide that Nate brought with him, which is just a perfect example of this convoluted, it's absurd. I'd actually be really curious to know how many people who receive that actually read it, or just the percentage of those that are produced are read. Right. Well, this is a sort of a biased sample that we have here, but I can say that I don't read those. I personally don't read those. I think they're much faster, more interesting ways to get information than that. And speaking again, I'll repeat myself, but respecting someone's time, that does the exact opposite. And like every generation, but the younger you go, the more this is true. The younger you go, the less we have a tolerance for someone not respecting our time. That's not to say that an older generation doesn't feel the exact same way, though. No one likes to feel, disrespected in that sense. So I don't think that that's fair to expect someone to look at that. And I don't think that just shortening things or we can be careful about how we synthesize information to make sure that just because it's shorter or faster, you're not losing the value of what's there. And that's why we pull on, again, basically what I'd call big data, big civic data, to make sure that even though it's fast and it's fun, it's not losing the integrity of what it accomplishes.
Great. Juan, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, real quick, just I don't think we should confuse preference for skill or ability. And so in that same time that if I can learn about an election in 5 minutes, those 5 minutes or potential, 2 hours that it would take me to dissect that book, I could also learn data science, or I could go learn how to cook on YouTube, or the gazillion of online courses that I can have access to. So because there's a competition for our attention, it doesn't mean their ability to process information is any lower. It just means that the content generator should be that much more thoughtful in how it's presented, so that I choose to invest my time in it. Because now it's not competing for how to vote, but it could be competing on how to go code the next great app.
Yeah, and I think the other component.
Very well put.
The other component to that is that, Nate mentioned this earlier. It's about educating the person, right? And in order to educate a person, we need to engage them. We also got to think about how that's happening at the school level, or what's going on at that school level. Maybe they're underfunded in terms of more voter education or how to vote and how to get out there in the political system. So I think that's part of the process that we need to start talking about. Is we need to fund programs or initiatives that educate voters or educate young people about the process.
And I think this is the ballot, voter See Political, it's all about, as Oscar was saying, engagement, which getting the person to actually look at the app and use it will one day get them to go out there and actually go testify at city council or a planning meeting. But the first step is to get them engaged in those 8 seconds, pique their interest, and one day the hope is that they will go out and get more engaged and actually take the time to learn how voting and how issues are made.
You'll be surprised if you ask a teenager, 15, 16, 17-year-old, that in order to vote, you have to register first. To me, that's probably when I said, well, they were like, yeah, we're going to go vote. Okay, so you're going to vote. So then they say, well, how do I vote? Well, you have to go register first to vote. You'll be surprised how many of them don't know that that's a step before you actually can vote.
I mean, even KPCC did help Joe vote, and when he went to the go vote, he wasn't registered. He spent like weeks with them, I think.
Yeah,
you guys
Make
did,
Alcara,
right?
the campaign you're talking about. Yep. Yes, I know. I'm going to keep thinking about that goldfish attention span, I think, the rest of the night here. But I want to thank everyone here so much for being here. We're all going to stick around. I know we didn't get to everyone's questions, but thank you so much to all of our panelists. This was a great conversation. Thank you to all of you for spending your evening with us. We really appreciate it. We also want to thank KPCC's amazing in-person team who helped put on this event. So thank you to everyone who did it. Feel free to mingle, come back for future events. Thank you. We appreciate it.